Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. This is episode number 353. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Lent.
Yeah.
A happy time.
Hope you made it off to church in time. I kind of messed you up last week.
Yeah. I got over there with like 10 minutes to spare. Which they get, the lectors, they freak
by,
out.
Right?
They don't see you, they're like,
yeah.
So.
Well, that's kind of like our church, because we have, we don't have just like one speaker. We don't have a pastor or minister or whatever. For Latter-day Saints, it's the worship services, the members that are chosen in advance by the leaders to speak on a topic. So we'll get to when we had more young people, we'd always throw a young person in there, though you'd be lucky to get a young person to speak for more than a minute anyway. But you get them up there and do that. But what the time I spent as a bishop, the freak out always was like, where is that speaker?
That's right. That's right. That's like, I hate basketball. I hate when I have 4 kids standing there and I'm watching that door for that 5th kid to come through.
That's a good point too, because I also kind of did some church basketball coaching and whatever for a little while with our kids, and the thing was that we never knew who was going to show up on a given Saturday. So you're like, okay, we need at least 5. So, because the other team is probably going to turn out 5. Now if the other team turned out 4, we usually would just give us 4. We didn't want to take unfair advantage, if they didn't have enough players.
I always, when that happens and I'm the one with the 4, I encourage the other coach to keep his 5 out there, because so there's some kids sitting on the bench because we did not bring enough players.
That's true.
And
it's not fair to them.
That's right. Punish us. We're the ones who didn't do what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree with
that. But I don't, when I was coaching at TJ, we played at Falls Church, and we got down to 4 because Falls Church had this thing. I mean, at TJ they had this thing, Model UN, and so like 3 weekends during the season, like we have games on Friday night, right? I would lose like 8 or 9 people of my 15 to what they call Model UN. They would go to Chicago, Philly, whatever, to these events. They would just all fly off somewhere, right? And so, you don't realize your tax dollars are paying for all that, right? So they would select a person or 2 to stay behind so that I would have enough people. But they didn't select it as like, we're going to give him a guard and a post. We're going to give him somebody who can play. It was just whatever 2 they came up with, right? Whoever didn't feel like traveling that weekend or whatever. So, it would end up with some kind of cockamamie lineups and stuff. So we got in foul trouble at Falls Church. We got down to 4 people, and we go away halftime. We come back. In the first half, girl fouled out in the first half, and so we come back, and I look out there. And I look at the other coach, and the other coach is holding up 4. And I told him the same thing I told you, put in another person. He goes, they decided this. I didn't tell them. The kids said, if they only have 4, we're only having 4. So if the kids choose it, I think that's good. The kids had a sense of fairness. They wanted, the thing to be balanced, and they took the thing. I can tell you that the best people in the world, for the most part, are kids, right? So I also used to ref the high school league in McLean, high school house girls league, right? It was 4 games every Sunday afternoon. And there was a girl who was special needs, but she could function on a basketball court, but she needed help, right? She needed to not get beat up and the ball taken from her every time it came, right? So the girls, I remember one game, the first time she catches it, some girl goes and takes it and goes in and makes a layup. After that, I don't know if the girl said something to her or what, but when she catches the ball, they would just get in front of her and defend, right? They wouldn't try to take it from her. Then she's not going to hurt you, So they pass and then say, go do something else, right? And the kids learned how to put that girl in the game, make her feel normal, right? And not they're not costing themselves the game. They're You know, they're still competing, and they treated her right. And no adults told them to do that. You know, they did that on their own. They measured out what that took on their own and made it happen. I've always thought that was like one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in basketball.
That's great. That's terrific. Okay, so before we get to the meteor news, we still have a few other things. It's National Clam Chowder Day. So I don't know. Are you a clam chowder guy?
I can't eat seafood like that, but it looks good. Clam chowder is one of those things I really wish I could, because it looks like it's a big, white, thick soup, cheesy soup. Seems like I don't know, because I haven't eaten it, but I guess it's cheese, right? That they do that with.
You can put cheese in it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know if there is. I don't know if there is. So I grew up, among the many soups that I ate, canned soups I ate, was chunky New England clam chowder, and that's all I ever knew. From the clam chowder set. I didn't even know there was a Manhattan style clam chowder, which is the red stuff, right? It's a whole different thing. And so I've had this kind of love affair with clam chowder. Now I'm sure the people in Boston and parts of like that, they're going to say that is not New England clam chowder the way it should be, but it's in a can, for heaven's sakes. Right.
Yeah, I don't get to drive to Boston tonight.
Yeah. If I see it on a menu and I'm just kind of in the right mood, I might order it. It's just something to do there. But when I saw that today, I thought, okay, well, that brings me back to my childhood, for whatever that's worth, which has just been way too long ago. We also have good weather. So we've had this massive snowstorm that bypassed us for the most part and went straight up to the northeast. They knew it was coming, and it was a doozy. I think it was Providence got something like
38 inches.
Yeah, almost 30. Was it almost 39?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a record for them. About 2 feet, I guess, in Manhattan and other parts of New York. Maybe more further north than that. So they got walloped pretty good. I saw that like Whoopi Goldberg, she basically was on remote for The View because she couldn't get. People were stranded. I mean, this is New York. New York's. You get down to Manhattan, you get into the city, and there's limited options. People park on the street. Well, the plows. They can only do so much if you're parking, so they ban street parking. Then where do those cars go? I mean, there's all kinds of logistical issues that are just kind of crazy. So 2 feet of snow. I don't care where you are. It's a lot of snow. You're New England. It's still a lot of snow. I keep thinking after the last storm we had, which wasn't a ton, but gave us our snowcrete, and it took us just as.
Yeah.
Connection. I can almost think that my entire lawn, and then boom, we get more snow. They're not as bad, and we can already see it melting off. But I'm like, I just want winter.
We got 5 inches here. It was not,
we got about 3-ish. Yeah, we got about 3-ish here. So, it's pretty. It can be pretty on the trees and stuff like that. But because it's the wet, heavy stuff, will go certain trees.
Right.
And I was driving back from the gym on Monday, and part of one lane of Mid-County Highway, one of those stupid trees that I don't even know why. I don't know why the county has these things planted the way they do, but they have a bunch of these like evergreens planted on a slope, and so they're always kind of looking like this anyway. And that's all it took was that storm to knock one over and block a lane. But, and the county hadn't come out there and done anything about it, and it's dark or something like that. That is a hazard. It's like, I'm surprised no one hit that sucker.
Yeah.
So it's a nuisance. I'm ready for spring. We're already seeing baseball. We see what's going on in Florida and Arizona. And the game's starting to be played. It's like, that's what I want to see.
The pro golf moves from the desert of California to Florida this week, and that's like a sign that spring is here. They're risking the East Coast. We're ready, and everybody's ready for it. I've never heard so many people this time of year say, because a lot of people like winter. That's their season. But this year, everybody's like, enough. Let's try something else.
Yeah. I think some of the storms, definitely gave enough cabin fever. We're like, that's enough. We're done.
Yeah.
We can take a little snow, but if we're out the next day, that's fine. But if we're kind of digging out for 2 days and then still waiting for snow to melt for another 3 weeks, that's over the top.
Yeah.
But
everything's closed. And I was talking to the basketball coaches about this, and what has happened is like our players have gotten out of shape. So it's not that they're rusty, right? They can still shoot or whatever, but they're exhausted. Like things that they were doing easily, they're now, so you're like, bro, you've been sitting around too much,
Your stamina is not there.
That's right.
So I was going to say the silver lining to some of the stuff the weather's been going on is that Utah actually got snow, which they needed badly. But this, it's not going to be enough to save their season. They need a lot more snow and snowpack if they're going to get through and have a decent summer without a big drought situation going on.
Right. The other thing is like the East Coast has had a very different winter than the rest of the country.
Right.
It's been reasonably mild elsewhere, and like you say, people wanting more snow, people needing more snow, and the places where they depend on that for water and for skiing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So out west, not the same. The South, they were with us for some of this, but not for all of it. And I mean, it's spring down there. They're playing baseball and they're having fun and doing stuff.
Yeah, my friends in the West, particularly in Utah and those places like that, they're like looking at my snow pictures and they're like, "That's exactly what we need here," and we're not getting it. So.
Oh well.
There are things that are happening around here. So we're now in the the beginning of the 5th year of the Ukraine-Russia war, which didn't start out as technically a war. I mean, it was considered an invasion by Russia into Ukraine, for which we have said numerous times that Putin was looking for, expecting a 2 or 3 day event and be done with it. And now we're starting year 5. We have been broadcasting. We have been podcasting since the beginning of this thing. This is crazy.
Right. I remember talking about it before it was happening. They're building up those troops. Oh, Biden do anything?
Yeah, and now we can call ourselves war correspondents almost.
That's right. That's right. There's a lot less risk than an actual.
That's right. That's a lot less risk. That's for sure. It's just crazy to see how that is. Anyway, so that is still slogging on.
That's exactly what it is. This slog, and you know what? We're helping them. Like no one's writing about it. I think Trump doesn't want anybody writing about it. But we're helping them. We're giving them the stuff they're using to really mess up the Russians, kind of keep them at bay. Drone attacks. I mean, we've destroyed a lot of refineries. Power infrastructure. Electric power infrastructure inside of Russia. So they've gotten to where they're dealing damage inside of Russia. So. That was kind of a break point. We weren't sure we wanted to do that because, Russia could nuke you, right? I mean, how far will Russia go to retaliate here? And it seems like not that far. It seems like they have acknowledged that they're in a quagmire, that it's not going to end quickly or it's not going to be wrapped up quickly without them backing off some. So. They're waiting for a thing where it can look like they did not back off. They got everything they wanted.
Yeah, and I was listening I heard a report the other day that actually, the drones are probably extending this conflict in the sense that the both sides are using drones. If they didn't have the drones, you might have a dramatically different outcome, in terms of things. But the drones are able to zero in and hit targets. Wipe out battalions or whatever, and so they're probably Russia's still trying to find the poor and pay them enormous amounts of money to go and fight, and And Zelensky's got, I think they we've been able to, the West has been able to get him a lot of materiel, including drones, and help him keep up. Since they're outmanned in general, they don't have that. The drones have helped them. Just create this, and that's still been a severe miscalculation by Putin as to what he thought he was going to get, and at least how quickly he was going to get it. But yeah, quagmire. 5 years ago, we said this could be a quagmire before it even really started.
Yeah.
We remember what happened to the Russian, to the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, and that just
so the Germans and Russia.
Yeah, I mean, so history is replete with invading forces that wound up in these quagmires that they were not expecting and didn't want.
That's right. It looked like an easy dub, and it ended up being a big problem.
Yeah,
and you have morale of the country, like you say, they're getting desperate for fighting age men there, because there's no one's volunteering, and they're having to go grab people off the streets and so forth, and they're running. That's a limited thing too. You could do that to surge, right? You need some in a hurry, but that's not a thing you can do continually over time. So he's running out of manpower options. The advantages that he had over Ukraine, the longer this goes on, the less potent they are. So they're dragging him into the mud.
Yeah.
And so also there is talk that on the other side of this, Trump is telling Putin, if you will get out of Ukraine, we can make a business deal that will, keep you as an energy broker, keep you in tech power, make your country prosperous, right? We got a big deal that you can take advantage of, but you got to get out of there first. So it'll be interesting to see, like, at what point does Putin decide to take the money and run?
That would be interesting. Putin, I don't know. I think Putin, I mean, he's got a big ego too. He doesn't want to lose face here. And so he's sticking with it, but his options are starting to narrow dramatically in terms of what can be done. If you spent 5 years and all that money and all that manpower, and then you've captured some territory, but you haven't been able to actually overrun the country and capture the flag, so to speak. Right. You've got a problem. I mean, and the West, the NATO alliance is pretty firmly behind Ukraine. So even though they're not giving them, boots on the ground, they keep supplying them with money and material, which helps Ukraine dramatically and helps try to even up the scale. So this has been an interesting situation to watch. It's unfortunate for all the death and destruction that's gone on both sides for this. This was completely unnecessary, but this is what happens when you got a guy like Putin in power. They think they can do this, and then after a certain point in time, losing lives means nothing to him. Right. So it's one of those unfortunate things. All right. So there was a little speech last night, which I have given up staying up for this. I remember when I used to do more tweeting and I was doing stuff at AIM. I would live tweet the State of the Union speech and stuff like that, and I gave that up years ago. With all of that, Trump gave his speech, technically, I guess, the longest in history. It was an hour and 47 minutes is what they clocked it in at. And, look, to me, State of the Union speeches, it's a chance for the president to talk about accomplishments, make some promises, most of which will never be kept because you can't get Congress to go along with most of your stuff anyway, in a lot of cases, or you can't get enough support to get it all the way through to get the bill on your desk. Right. But then you can honor a bunch of people who are heroic or face, kind of a lot of things. So it's kind of a big show. I don't see this as a huge deal, but all eyes are on Trump, and I don't know. I mean, what's your reaction? I mean, I've been reading some reaction to this, but I want yours first.
So first of all, we on the right revere Ronald Reagan, but he's the one that started all these people in the crowd, and all that. And he didn't help us there. I mean, I guess that, some of the scenes that have been created over the years have been kind of, torpedo on both sides. But, that's show business and something that's supposed to be a business, right? We're trying to learn what's going on, what the president thinks, how the president thinks the country's doing, and what he wants to do to address the problems, right? But that's not what we get. We get, guests of this guy, guest of that, and we get, the other side all wearing the same color and shouting from the gallery and stomping out and holding some other weird. I don't know if you saw this, but there was some like counter programming event the Democrats did last night where they had a giraffe, a person in a giraffe costume singing or talking or whatever.
Was that the People's State of the Union thing they were doing?
Something like that, yeah. And it's like you look at them and it's like, did anybody vet this and say, well, do we look like a serious political party if we do this? I don't think so. I mean, they let the crazies run stuff over there on the other side, for better or for worse. As for the speech, like you said, it was a lot of his greatest hits. He didn't really have a whole lot of policy stuff. And it's because of what you said, and this is something we need to think about as Americans. The notion of, I have an idea that will help the country, and let's make it into legislation that we can all agree on and send it over to me and I'll sign it, is, that's largely fantasy now. The only bills that pass Congress now are either ones no one, inconsequential, naming post offices and whatnot, or budget bills that are required to pass, right? There's almost nothing else can get through Congress because of the partisanship, the situation on the ground over there, whatnot. So, a lot of being president now is figuring out how to do what you have to do without Congress. Trump was doing through previously designated power. Congress had voted to give the president the tariffs, right? The tariff Supreme Court case went against Trump. I think since the last time we did this, right?
Right.
And so the Supreme Court now says under IEPA, the authority he was using, you can't do that. He has like 3 others that he's going to use, and the leftists are saying those aren't legal either, but they'll have to go to court and prove all that. And, and Trump has rightfully said, if you try to go back on the tariffs on me on this, I'm going to punish you some other way, right? If the country, whatever he said, if you say, okay, I don't have to pay your tariffs anymore, then we're going to get you some other way, right? And so, I don't think, the Treasury Secretary says that the tariff income will not decrease 1 penny over because of the Supreme Court ruling. So he obviously has mapped out some ways to do this without Congress again, and without the approval of the court to use IEPA for it. So it's a new world. It's a different world, and it's not viable, And I think part of it is, congressional leadership has been weak on both sides. Whoever's controlled the House. When's the last time we had a really good, effective congressional leader who could build consensus and get stuff done? It's like, going back to the Democrats, 30, 40 years ago. It's been a long time. For years they went with the Pelosi, who is, no very small-minded, tiny person of a politician. And, that was the way they thought. It kind of dragged them down and kind of pulled the country apart, for the sake of saying that we have a woman in charge or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you think back about, House leaders like a Tip O'Neill or something like that,
Right.
It's a different era now. I mean, and SOTU, as you kind of allude to, it's really become political theater.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It really means nothing much at all anymore. It should be, and it should just be a speech where the president lays out, where America is, what the vision is. You want to come away from that speech feeling good, and don't attack the other side. Don't let them attack. But you have the other side, like you said. You have we had the Democrats, the women, they wore all white and all this kind of stuff. So
Pelosi tore up the speech.
Yeah, you had all this stuff, and then you have all these other people. I think I think when Reagan invited these people, um, it was very Reagan-esque, and it seemed almost appropriate for someone like Ronald Reagan to do it because he could deliver a speech like none other, But others didn't others it didn't really have the same effect. But everybody copied that, and now we're just kind of mired in this thing of like, who can we get to kind of bring some sympathy along the way?
Right.
In the long run, the SOTU, I mean, it doesn't affect elections, right? I mean, it's February. I
Right.
mean, the next election is not for another, just 8.5, 9 months. So this is going to be a mere memory, distant memory. It'll just disappear
Yeah.
for
It'll
most
be a
people.
blip by then.
Yeah.
But you are trying to set the tone, right? It does have a role in that. You're trying to say this is kind of what you can expect this year. And if you haven't figured out who you're voting for yet, if you want these things, vote for us because that's what we're working on.
Yeah,
So,
but as you said, I mean, there was really nothing new out there. I mean, he did throw out this idea of $1,000 for retirement accounts for people who didn't have access to 401ks. It's like, okay, well, that's fine, but how are we going to pay for it, and how is that going to operate? And $1,000 does not do really anything for anybody for retirement unless they are actually going to seriously do something, and it's a program where they build retirement. But we've had IRAs for over 40 years, and so there's opportunities for anybody who earns income, or and files income taxes, can open up an IRA if they choose to. That's up, that's we've gone from the defined benefit pension plans of the old days of the GMs and the IBMs and a lot of corporate America to defined contribution, where your pension, your retirement is built on kind of a layer of Social Security plus whatever you saved and maybe put away in a retirement account and got tax sheltered in one way or the other.
right.
And that's fine. I mean, the taxpayers, they kind of foot the bill for that, because if you go into a Roth plan, you've paid some of the taxes, but you won't pay the taxes when you take it out. So it's
Right.
like forever tax free. So the government won't get you there. So there's money kind of technically lost, but it's money that's owed, that's saved by taxpayers. Like, I can't wait to get my my Social Security, this summer, because I'm like, I want to hopefully live long enough that I collect at least most of it. Most of what at least I paid into it. If I can get that plus what I would have made had I kept it, that would have been nice too. But this is going to take a long time because of the way the government runs things. But it's something's better than nothing. It's just kind of this whole waiting period. A lot of Americans are terrible about saving. We know that retirement, they're way underfunded for retirement. Other Americans do a much better job with that, and so but I don't know that I want the federal government throwing yet another program in there. I mean,
yeah, he has some private funding for this, right? Did he say?
I don't know if he's got private. He's definitely got, he's definitely getting private funding for the kids thing, which is good. He's got Michael Dell and some others, and I think they're going to be throwing a lot of money, and that's fine. I mean, I think that private money. I mean, that it might. Not having the government run it would be better. If we can get the private sector to run that, fine.
Yeah. And it's like that's another tool that like no president has dared use for a long time, which is asking private companies to be involved in helping the country. Right? It's like during COVID, every day. Remember, Trump would have these press conferences, and he would bring up. Like he brought up the CEO of Jockey Underwear, right? The Jockey Underwear Company. They had rejiggered their factories to make PPP and masks and so forth. So all the factories that were making T-shirts and underwears were changed to make this stuff. And all these kind of companies and the stuff they would do, and he would highlight, hey, this company, they helped America. They did this and that and the other. And like we haven't tapped into corporate energy since really World War II, right? It's sort of like, hey, government will just do it itself. We don't want any conflicts and all that. It's like those are the guys who have the money, right? And they're willing to do it. It should be, that's a no-brainer. right? You're talking about like income, wealth inequality. Hey, here's somebody volunteering to balance that out a little bit for you. Oh no, we want government in charge. So, I think you're seeing that's one of the things I think will be a legacy of Trump is that future presidents will say, hey, when I'm really stuck here, maybe I can ask some of the rich people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been some good aspects of that when you refer to that. I think I'm okay with Trump because doing the talking about the energy with the AI, all the data centers and stuff like that, because I think that has been kind of a conundrum for a lot of people. Is just that there's these huge data centers going up all over the country, and they require massive amounts of energy. But
and
why
water.
should and water?
That's the thing that people are missing on that is the demand for water is spectacular, and some of these people like around Shreveport, I think there's 5 data centers under construction right now within a 30-mile radius of Shreveport, right? So there's the people aren't using that land; it's cheap to get, and the places where you can get natural gas out of the ground or whatever. There's not a lot of value to the land. It's okay farmland, but it's not great, and you're not really connected to the rest of farm. So, they're getting a lot of, they're building like 5 of them now, and where does that water come from? South is not bad. Louisiana is not bad on water, but it could be. It could get to be.
Well, yeah, I mean that is a problem. I mean, water. I mean, and because of hand in hand with that, with increased electrical use. How do you do that without fixing the grid or expanding the grid, which
Right.
is already kind of constrained, around the country. But
one of the things they're talking about on that is mini nukes.
Right, the SMRs, the small nuclear reactors or whatever, SMRs, whatever. Small modular reactors, I guess it was what it's called. Though that to me, I love that idea because. I love the idea. I love the idea in general, just because it's like we're talking nuclear energy,
right.
which has had a black eye, since 3 Mile Island, and yet it's a clean form of energy, And they figured out how to build smaller ones, more cost efficiently. If they can generate that energy, they'll be able to generate that energy for themselves on the cheap, overall. And
right, but you can't get in a situation where your corporate bottom line is not faring well, so you cut back on safeguards.
Right.
You got this is serious.
I mean, there's some other issues that have to go along with that. I mean, you don't want one of those necessarily too close to you,
right?
Because there's still a risk there, and that's why usually, nuclear reactors are not near people,
right?
For a reason. There's a buffer. And everything for that. So, but it's an interesting thing to see kind of how nuclear power is having a little bit of a renaissance and a resurgence because of that, and, the countries in Europe that, said, oh, we're going green, we're going to shut down our nuclear reactors. Not going so well for them on the energy front, right?
That's right.
So that hasn't worked out well for them. I'm not as keen on Trump, going after, the corporations about, that are bought and building and buying and, on the home front. I understand, part of the issue is, though, I mean, I understand, so there's some of these companies are fairly concentrated, but for the entire housing stock, they are just a blip on the radar. I mean, they occupy a very small space in the whole
thing. You're talking about him saying he's trying to stop the Chinese and other people from assembling large blocks of U.S. homes.
No, I'm talking about a company that's called like Invitation Homes. They build and they buy homes and they sell them. They own complete neighborhoods, multi neighborhoods, and so and they have a business model that just says this is what we're going to charge you, and and all this stuff, and so people, the liberals in particular, have said, well, this is making home ownership unaffordable, But they, they're subject to some of the same market forces. If interest rates rise, they can't sell their homes. If there's too much competition from other people selling their homes, individuals still selling homes out there, they still have to compete with that. And if you comprise 2 or 3% of the nation's housing stock, you're not overly influencing, the prices of housing and making it unaffordable. I tend to think that this is more of a liberal argument than one the conservatives need to get into. You kind of watch it and see what's going on there. These public companies have taken a beating, definitely, PR beating on this, but they've been operating for years. And when they first started operating, a lot of people thought this was great because they thought the homes were affordable. Homes and mortgages are affordable. Now they're turning it upside down, saying, "Oh, no, no, no! You corporate, landlords, you're bad, bad, bad." Kind of on the whole, Zohar Mamdani is like, "Oh, you can't do this. We got to cap this in some way, shape, or form." I'd still like to think we have somewhat of a free market economy that you can do things. I don't want the Chinese, I don't want the Japanese, I don't want other countries coming here and buying up a bunch of our land and doing stuff. I mean, we had that issue years ago initially with farmland. We've talked about lots of different things with China and what they've been doing here in the U.S. But and the Japanese had that big foray in the 1980s buying land. They bought like Pebble Beach golf course, and everything went cratering, and so they lost their shirt. So it's like but I think by and large the U.S. should be owned by the U.S. If you've got a few foreign investors and minority partners, you're probably not going to be able to keep a lot of that.
They shouldn't be forcing policy.
Right. Yeah. You shouldn't be doing that. But but I think he mentioned Iran last night a little bit, kind of a little more threat to Iran and what's going on over there. I think Iranians are they're ready to welcome the Shah's family back, right? I mean,
yeah, that's right.
They're tired of what they've had for.
Where the Shah lives, right?
Bethesda, I think.
Yeah, Avenel lives on the golf course. Yeah.
It's not a bad place to live.
No, it's not a great place to live. John Glenn was living there too before he died. There's a lot of people there. A lot of
So it's
a lot of disgraced former government leaders of other countries.
Where's Daniel Snyder living? Was he living over there somewhere?
You know what? I think he moved. I think he.
Yeah, I mean he's left that. I think I was selling, but did he own a piece somewhere over there where he got in trouble for cutting down the tree?
Right, that's right. He lived on the river and had like they.
Yeah. Daniel Snyder.
That guy, he managed to, he was like a mini Trump. Like whatever he did made everybody angry. He could not help himself. And if the team would have ever won, he could have gotten away with everything, right? But he could not, And I kind of, part of me feels bad. I think that, he did that with the best of intentions, right? He was a guy that grew up here, was a big fan of the team, bought the team. Right, got rich enough to do that, and then really wanted to run it well and make them win and have a bunch of Super Bowls, and just like this was not something he was capable of managing. Right, there was bad people involved from the start. The only coach who finished with a winning record for the Redskins after he bought them, or during the time he owned them, was North Turner, who was the coach when he bought the team. So most of the winning record he had was before he got involved. Right. I mean, he couldn't. Joe Gibbs couldn't even win with that guy as the owner.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I mean, owners shouldn't meddle like that.
It's
hard not to.
You have to meddle productively, right? Like the Steinbrenners meddled productively. Yeah. Robert Kraft meddles productively. The people who own the Dodgers meddle productively, right?
What about Jerry Jones?
Jerry Jones meddles unproductively. Well, I mean, here's the thing about Jerry Jones. They're usually pretty good, right? They're not good enough to win the Super Bowl, but they're 12-5, 11-6, right? Those aren't terrible records. You don't blow up your whole team over 11-6, right? The last year or so, it's been a little less than that. But if he was terrible, if he would go 0-17, then he would have to say, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing. I gotta get out of this. I gotta really trust someone to do it right. But that never happens. So he still thinks he's a player or two away from making it happen. He's not getting the right signal,
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm hopeful. ownership across all major sports. I mean, like you said, there are some good ownership teams, and
Yeah.
and then there's some terrible ownership teams.
Yeah. And Jerry is not the worst GM in the league. Not anywhere close.
No, and he's a good showman too, because I mean, through Cowboy Stadium and through all the things that they've done, and just build these fabulous stadiums and all the stuff that he does. He's a money making machine, even when the team isn't that good.
In one of the smaller markets in the league.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and I don't know how much money he's made on paper, from the time he had bought the team to now, because valuations of sports franchises have just gone through the roof to crazy valuations. So, that's a whole nother thing. Trump needs to work on getting people in that industry to come and say, can you do some things for us? Because they're minting money.
Yeah, that's right. They are.
They are really, really minting money. So what on the SOTU thing too? There was a clip from about David Axelrod. He actually kind of gave backhanded praise, I think, to Trump in terms of how his message was. I think he was really talking about it from the point of his base, and everything like that, but gave him some faint praise for the messaging that Trump got through overall last night. So, you did.
That's not what he said. Yeah, I think he was fairly accurate in that, he told all of America what his side is doing and why they're doing it, right? And he had it set up right, and he did a good job of explaining that. Like what's going forward, we didn't really hear a lot about that, but he explained how things are. He did a good job of exposing the left's distance from the cultural mean of the country, right? Like he had them, opposing things that they shouldn't have been opposing, right? Like the mother of the girl who got killed in Charlotte on the train, right? And they're sitting down, they're ignoring her, right? It's like, that's a bad look. Trump was right. These people are crazy. I mean, he made them look bad. He made them look bad on a few things where they, things that Americans expect you to support, they did not support. So, I don't know that it was a terrific night for Trump, but it was a bad night for the Democrats.
Yeah, look, I look, as a president of the United States, I wouldn't go and actually, basically call my opponents crazy in public like that. I think you can imply that by a lot of the things that he said, and he talked about like Somali pirates and stuff like this. I mean, his jabs at Ilhan Omar and stuff like that. When I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like, oh.
And she was furious. He
fired some serious shots. You don't have to tell the American public, say they're crazy. You just go ahead and cite examples, and everybody sitting back there can go, yeah, they're crazy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He expressed, you mentioned the whole SCOTUS decision. I mean, I'm glad that he refrained from attacking the Supreme Court per se and just saying he was disappointed with the decision, rather than the type of rant he had after the decision, which hopefully blew it out of his system. And like you said, there was a plan. I mean, based on the oral arguments, this decision was not completely unexpected. We kind of knew that this was going to go. That they had looked at those oral, the oral arguments were already kind of leaning against Trump. So the decision, was not a complete surprise. And, and they were ready because they said, okay, well, he ranted and, whatever, said his piece. But then they went ahead and did the Section 122, and he's got 15% global tariffs. So he's got 150 days before Congress has got to get involved. So that, and if he can't get something going there, then there's probably yet another plan they're readying. So they're looking at there are other mechanisms that you kind of alluded to, that there are other things that he can use, that he can probably keep it going. And will it cost any more money than it already is for the Treasury? Probably not, because, one of the things that's happened since Friday was all these companies saying, oh, well, we want our money back from the illegal tariffs. Okay. Well, that's easier said than done.
You're not getting it. Here's the short version.
If you're a big company, you could probably sue and you might get something back. Okay. But you've got to be the guys with the team of lawyers to go through and do this.
Yeah.
There are ways of getting tariff money back if there were mistakes made. The government apparently has a very good system of catching that and then automatically kind of refunding people, but they're not ready for something like this. So a smaller guy who doesn't have that, I don't see them getting it, and we don't really know exactly how this next set of tariffs here is going to impact it anyway. So, well, it kind of covers some of this anyway. Now, personally, from my wife's standpoint, she would, she's thinking like, oh, maybe some of these products we use will go down. I said, don't count on it, okay? We actually, because we buy a lot of stuff that comes over basically comes over from Asia, different parts of Asia, and things like that. Because being Korean, being half, and I'm half Japanese, there'll be a lot of Asian foodstuffs in the house. Well, the price of that has just gone up tremendously. Combination between inflation and tariffs and supply chain, all those things factored in, and just blew those things out the window. Where they're 2 or 3 times as much as they used to be. Will they come back down? I don't. There maybe we'll get a little bit of a reduction. I just don't see a major reduction. It's kind of like we've kind of hit another base, and inflation has been ticking down. Where are we? Are we going to get it lower? Yeah, maybe. Trump is funny because he's like, beforehand, he's like, I give myself or whatever an A plus whatever, on the economy. It's like, no, you don't get an A on the economy from the American public. You'll be lucky if you get a B for a lot of things because their perception is their reality. And that when they see high beef prices and things like that, things that are not your fault, they're still going to blame you. And when it comes November to the midterms, they need to see that their wages are still rising, inflation's going down, jobs are creeping up, and there's still jobs are being
you need
created.
To see that by the summer.
Well, we'll see.
So
I mean,
can't wait till
I
November
don't know.
2nd to figure it out.
By
the summer it starts getting locked in.
I don't know, because economic policy can be very complicated, and I would hope that things go in that direction.
Yeah, I think a few more good inflation reports, and Trump will be okay, because it is trending in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is going in the right direction. It's just been a kind of a funny economy in terms of the way it hasn't gone the way it hasn't fit the normal pattern. So we're not very sure. So we'll continue to watch the reports as they come out over the next several months. And all right. This one was kind of surprising to me, is that Mexico actually went ahead and took out a drug lord. The previous president of Mexico was like, we're just going to get along.
Yeah.
Sheinbaum, I mean, she went after. They went and they killed. Now there's a lot of fighting going on, and Americans got trapped in Puerto Vallarta. They couldn't get out of there. Nobody could guarantee. But it was interesting. I mean, I was really kind of surprised that she decided to go ahead and just say, we're going after some of these drug guys. And we want to turn things around. I don't know what that means going forward, but it's interesting.
So we read these headlines and it looks eye popping. You took the chief criminal out of a criminal organization, and the criminal organization responded by attacking 2 airports, right, and a few other things. But I always assumed that the power of the cartels would produce a much stronger response. You had 2 days of trouble at 2 airports. I mean, that was a minor. The police, the commandos, people in the Mexican military went and cleaned that up with alacrity, pretty quickly, within 2 or 3 days. So, if that's all the cartels got, and she's clearly doing that because she's under pressure from Trump to turn these people over, right? But if that's all they got, if that's all their resistance amounts to, you're going to see a lot more of it, right? To me, that revealed weakness in the cartels. They lashed out. One guy's that important to that organization, really, that y'all going to put all those other people at risk and all the finding out at risk. I mean, you're getting on the opposite side of the government now, and the government appears to be prepared to use resources to get rid of you. So, if I were them, I would lick my chops and go back in the cave for a little bit. But, I think that the signal she should get is they really can't do anything. I really am in control of Mexico. I am the president of Mexico. I control an army. I can go send people out there and get things done.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on that in terms of it's like I think this should embolden Scheinbaum to potentially look at other targets, and the cartels are probably thinking like, okay, well, we better double and triple and quadruple our security and reinforcements and whatever, because we were not expecting this. This was a complete surprise to us that this happened. These cartels, as far as I can tell, I mean,
I think they had to know. I don't know about complete surprise. I think they
well,
had.
I mean, I don't think that I don't think. I mean, look, Scheinbaum's been in office for a little while. I don't think they were expecting her to actually go this far because
right.
There isn't a Mexican president in recent memory that's actually tried to really do anything about this situation. Right.
But the situation, on the board has changed a lot too, because like now the leaders to her north and south are, on the side of law and order, of fixing this, of stopping all these cartels from running these countries. So, she's under a lot of different kinds of pressure. I think that it was a big wake up call for her when they tried to get the vote passed to the American states condemning Trump, and they said no, we're not going to do it. All the people who've gotten elected saying they're Trumpites, Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador, Chile, are saying, we're not going to vote against Trump. We're not mad at him. I think it was something about the Panama Canal they were mad about. But so like she tried to make trouble for them, and she found out that the region is not behind her. So I think that she started reacting differently to these things after that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that she's definitely under some pressure, and we'll see whether or not there's going to be further progress on the drug front. I mean, Mexico is a haven for this stuff, and but I mean, she's weakened that one cartel for at least temporarily until they figure out. I don't know if they had a strong enough number two. A lot of these cartels, to me, it looks like, I mean, they're really built around the guy, the number one person. Yeah. And so when number two is maybe capable, but doesn't have necessarily the same power and charisma and whatever it is.
Well, it could be 3 or 4 number twos.
Yeah,
they're really interesting.
And they may fracture because this cartel was an offshoot of Sinaloa. Yeah. So this could split off into a bunch of different directions potentially. Right. So, all right. Also, New York. I think Trump mentioned Mamdani last night about was it the snow shoveling or no, the voting? I guess it was. But there was also some story which I don't know how true it was about how he required ID to shovel snow.
Yeah, he was hiring people like off the street to shovel snow, and it required 2 forms of ID to shovel snow. Right? So I mean, I don't know. To me, it's like leave us alone. This guy's a bad. He is exactly what New York deserves. Like there is H.L. Mencken said, they're going to get what they voted for, good and hard. And you got to go through it, right? He's going to try his stuff. He's going to find out that a lot of it fails, that doesn't work. But he's going to, he's got to try this playbook now. I mean, he got elected saying, I'm going to change everything and I'm going to have a whole new approach, and, win, lose, or draw, that's what you're up against.
Well, and I saw this video the other day, but these protests by some black homeowners, and they were protesting against Mamdani because it was like, oh, okay, so you want to raise our property taxes because you're not going to be able to tax the rich. It's like, no, that doesn't work that way, kind of a thing. So they were hot and bothered about this. It's like, this is, he made a lot, just like a lot of politicians, he made a lot of promises. He's a very charming guy and things like that, but his policies are horrible. And people, the voters, I mean, look, they get what they deserve. They get what they voted for, and elections have consequences, all things that we have said on this program. And this is what's happening is that, we are going to have to raise your property taxes 9.5%, in New York. It's like, Okay, yeah, that's not going to go over very well. And the fact that if it trickles down to your middle income, guys, that's no, you're a one-term mayor and that's it at this point if you keep this up.
Yeah, and because New York is it's kind of like New Orleans. You don't really have the most places if the policies are bad, and like Virginia's about to find this out, you can just move, right? I don't live under those policies anymore. But New York, most of those people moving is not a viable option. Who they are and where they live and what they do. They're going to be New Yorkers, so their approach is not going to be to abandon it. Their approach is going to be to fix it. So and that's a problem for him because, like you say, what he's now backed himself into some really unpopular corners. And I mean, quickly, right? How long has he been mayor? Since New Year's, right? Not even 2 months yet. So I don't know. I think I think you're right. I think if he can get to 2 terms, it'll be remarkable.
It will be. All right. As we wrap up the show, just a quick couple of sports notes. The Olympics have finished, and the USA men's hockey team finished it in grand fashion by beating Canada in overtime, winning the first gold medal in hockey since 1980, since Lake Placid and the Miracle on Ice. At which time that was the amateurs that were doing it versus the pros that are playing now. But that it was a great game. I mean, and the USA hockey, the women's team had already won the gold against Canada. So I don't know. It's
we're better at
I saw a young friend. Yeah, and there's a friend of mine. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it took over. I mean, it's quite a game. It was still a hard fought game in that sense, but we came out on top, and so I breathed a sigh of relief because I'm just thinking, like, based on all the political turmoil, the tension between Canada and the U.S. is like, I'm glad we won.
Yeah, I'm glad we won, and it does. These things do bring the country together. I think that the players showing up at the State of the Union last night. And one of the things is like it's receiving very little attention, but Trump said during the speech that the women were coming to the White House because the early reports that they refused to, and this, that, the other, the left was all having a field day with women at least have the courage to tell Trump no. Well, they turned around according to Trump last night and said yes. So I think they will come. I think that's one of those things you got to just keep doing it, and it'll be fine, right? Trump keeps those are like that's not the first team that's turned him down and then turned around and said yes, right? So apparently when these people they strike these stances, someone goes and talks to them and whatever they say, it rolls the people over. They're like, okay, we'll be there. So they'll be there at some point. The men will be there. I guess I don't know if that was their official deal, but you will see the women there at some point.
All right, and then I saw a report that LSU is #1 in baseball. So congratulations.
That won't last. They lost last night to McNeese, so right out of that #1 spot. That's the thing about baseball. I was thinking about that. I saw that on the list, and like, I want to get in another plug for my school. I went to LSU Shreveport last year. I don't know. We talked about this some.
Right, we did. You mentioned it before.
Yeah, they went 59-0. I mean, to me, the really impressive thing is the and-0. Like, baseball, it's like there's so many, LSU plays McNeese 50 times. LSU is going to win about 48 of those games, right? LSU is better at baseball than McNeese. But on any given night, McNeese can win a game, right? They can win the one game they have to win. So, and LSU Shreveport managed to sidestep all that. Now, they have lost 2 games this year. LSUS has. They're off. They're like 18-2 or something. They play a lot of games early down there, but but their home winning streak is still intact. They're at 47 or something in a row at home. So and they're now big news. Like every time they play, I see big stories on it and everything because they did and-0 is really incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we still have one team left. I think that's undefeated in Division I basketball, right? And
that's right. Miami.
20, are they 28-0 or something like that?
Yeah.
So, that's you could, yeah, they are a story in and of itself for doing that. I mean, and look what Indiana did this year, remarkable football story. So you just
Right.
have all these, when you don't lose a game in a college sport like that, and you have as going through there, and baseball's hard because you play so many games.
Right.
So
Right.
that is a slog.
And there's so many ways you can lose without, football, like, LSU plays McNeese in football. We're just bigger and more athletic. We're going to win, right? But in baseball, a good hot pitcher and you hit the ball real hard, but right at people one night. I mean, baseball you can just pummel people and lose the game. It's, it's just an absurd sport. That's why I love it.
All right, we're done. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And always, God bless America. And I got to check my calendar, but I may not be here next week. But I'll send you a message, Brian. Okay. I'll double check that. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you again.